Regular calendar, Senate Joint Resolution on second reading. Senate Joint Resolution 306, proposing an amendment to Section 6 of Article 2 of the Constitution of Virginia and proposing an amendment to the Constitution of Virginia by adding in Article 2 a section numbered 6-A relating to apportionment, Virginia Redistricting Commission. Reported from the Committee on Privileges and Elections with a substitute, and there are 4 floor amendments.
The Senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker.
Mr. President, I'll move the committee substitute.
Thank the Senator.
To get things started.
The question is, shall the committee substitute be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee substitute is agreed to.
And Mr. Chair, Mr. President.
Senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker.
I do not have copies of a 4 floor amendment, so I would like to. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we waive the reading of the floor amendment.
Question is, shall the reading of the floor amendment be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendment is waived. Senator from Northern Fairfax, Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been on the P&E committee for more than 25 years, and I think the meeting that we had dealing with this redistricting was perhaps the most complicated in all of that time. This amendment deals with transparency, and there was always a desire to have transparency in whatever bill came out, but unfortunately, in the complications of it all, it didn't happen. There was a feeling that the original One Virginia 2021 4-part dealing with the transparency was a bit verbose and had some things that were better dealt with in the code. But 2 parts of that that part of their bill, I think, are truly important, and that's what's in this amendment. The first is that all the meetings are going to be public, and that there will be at least 3 public hearings in different parts of the Commonwealth to receive comments from the public. Second part is that all the records and documents are going to be public. So will any internal communications and communications from outside parties will also be public. And that's what this does. It's got the strong support of One Virginia 2021.
Thank the Senator.
Be agreed to.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose is the Senator from James City County, Senator Normand, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. In the spirit of bipartisan collaboration, which I am hopeful will be contagious, I rise in support of the proposed amendment.
Senator has the floor.
I have said all I'm going to say.
Said all you're going to say. Oh, wow. It's outstanding. For what purpose does Senator from Fauquier, Senator Vogel, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise in support of the amendment, and perhaps I can elaborate on his very brief remarks,
Senator has the
which
floor.
Is very rare, as the body knows. I would just like to say we heard this in committee, and I appreciate the patron who has introduced a floor amendment. The discussion was in committee whether or not this should appear in the Constitution or whether or not it should appear in criteria, and there was some difference of opinion. And I think that having it transparency is such a high priority, and as it's set forth here, I think it actually warrants being more than just criteria, but actually being in the language. And so I would also ask the members of the body to support her amendment. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does the Senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker, rise?
Mr. President, I rise to join with the Senator from Fauquier, the Senator from James City, and the Senator from Northern Fairfax in supporting this.
Thank the Senator. Do any other senators wish to be heard on the floor amendment? Seeing none, the question is, shall the floor amendment be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Floor amendment is agreed to. The senior senator from Richmond City, Senator Sturtevant.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have three amendments, but Mr. President, I would like to withdraw floor amendments numbers 1 and 2.
Without objection, floor amendments 1 and 2 are withdrawn.
Mr. President, I move that we waive the reading of floor amendment number 3.
Question is, shall the reading of floor amendment number 3 be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor amendment is waived. Senior Senator from Richmond City, Senator Sturtevant.
Mr. President, I move that floor amendment number 3 be agreed to, and speaking to that.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I'm very proud of what this body is in the process of doing, and that is working on real, meaningful redistricting reform. Gerrymandering is as old as politics, and both parties have done it. There's no denying that. But this is an opportunity for us in the coming decade to put before the voters and to put in our Constitution a new way forward and a way to draw districts in a way that they have not been drawn in the past, and that is by taking consideration of political party and incumbents out of the process. And that's what this very simple floor amendment seeks to do. It says no electoral district shall be drawn with the intent of favoring or disfavoring any political party, incumbent legislator or member of Congress or individual. It's short, it's to the point, it's simple, but that, I think, its beauty is in its simplicity, and it is something that I'm hopeful that everyone in this body can get behind, so that we can move into the next decade after putting this before the voters to draw our districts in the fairest way possible, and that is in a way that takes those significant political considerations out of the process as much as we possibly can. And with that, Mr. President, I'd renew my motion that we agree to the floor amendment.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does the Senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker, rise?
Mr. President, I rise to speak to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to this particular amendment. I do not think it is something that is useful and beneficial. I think it is something that presents some significant issues and some challenges that we can otherwise avoid in moving forward on things. This deals with the drawing of districts, the drawing of district lines, and what the effects are of those changes to those lines. Every aspect of districts, every change that's made of the district lines favors or disfavors political parties and incumbents. So therefore, any change is automatically going to have this impact. So the question then becomes, what is the intent, and whether there is an intent to do this specifically to favor a political party or disfavor a political party or an incumbent or someone else. Clearly, some will question the intent of the people who are involved in drawing these lines and the actions taken by the members of the Commission, of whom there will be 16, 8 citizen members, 8 legislators, 4 House members, 4 Senate members. Of those 8, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans appointed. And some are likely to challenge the lines based upon what they believe the intent may have been. I'm less concerned about what the effect of the challenges than I am on terms of the action, the effect that it would have on the drawing of the lines themselves within the Commission and the actions taken thereafter. I think this language has a potentially chilling effect on the Commission, because they will be very concerned about the risk of legal challenge, even when there's not clear intent to try to manipulate things in a nefarious way, because they don't want to go forward with something that has the potential for being challenged and in effect having a map thrown out. So therefore, I think this language being in the Constitution itself, not in code, but in the Constitution itself, would make the members of the Commission more hesitant to adjust lines of various maps that they may be presented with, to improve those maps and make them better for the citizens of the Virginia, for the citizens of the Commonwealth, rather than being able to feel less encumbered in terms of how they could act on things. I think it could particularly diminish the roles of the citizen members of the Commission, who may be less involved in drafting some of the options that are looked at in the first place, because they then would have to make decisions about suggesting changes to those lines. And that's what I think is most likely to draw the legal challenges in these types of things. I think this amendment might deter the Commission from coming up with politically balanced maps, which I think is something that we all would subscribe to, because of the fear of making any decision that could jeopardize the upholding of the map when a challenge might be made. I think it makes it much more likely that in the end the courts will draw our lines, because the Commission may be unable to agree on a map because they're not able to negotiate and to resolve issues in ways that are beneficial for the Commonwealth as a whole. It makes it, I think, much more likely that a party that feels it is disfavored by the maps that have been proposed by the Commission would oppose it in the General Assembly and therefore not vote to approve it, because it has to come to the General Assembly for an up or down vote, and make it more likely that the governor would be taking similar action. I don't think it's in our interest to try to go forward with something that would make it more likely that we would have the courts draw lines. We've been through that with the congressional districts this decade. We've been through that now with the House of Delegates districts for this decade. I think it's better that we have people in Virginia drawing these lines and we have maps that are reflective of the citizens of the Commonwealth. The underlying resolution here that passed 13-0 with one abstention out of the Privileges and Election Committee is filled with checks and balances. I think we have extraordinarily large numbers of checks and balances requiring supermajorities in many different respects that protect everybody's interest in this process. And I am confident that with the checks and balances that are in there, that without this amendment, that we can develop good maps for the congressional districts, for the state Senate districts, and for the House of Delegate districts. This amendment sends the message that we don't trust this Commission to be able to do its job before it's even formed. And I think that is inappropriate for us to move forward with this type of thing right now, and to, in effect, start to put criteria into a Constitution rather than into the Code of Virginia. And I would hope it be the pleasure of the body to reject this amendment.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Chesapeake, Senator Cosgrove, rise?
Speak to the amendment, Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I've been in the General Assembly for 16 years, and 12 of that was in the body down the hall. And with profuse thanks to Senator Norman, the gentleman from James City County, I'm on P&E in the Senate. Again. But let me tell you, in all of that time serving on P&E, I have never, ever voted for one of these bills. Never. But I believe the time is ripe for one of these bills. And the P&E committee looked at all the bills and rolled the proposed bills into Senator Barker's bill. You know, it was said that the beauty is in the simplicity of the amendment, but I can tell you that a landmine is simple in design, but it makes it no less lethal. The gentleman from Southern Fairfax was dead on his comments about the ability in the future to look at this and say, whoever has the upper hand in a drawn district by this commission will have been favored either by party or whatever criteria. There's always going to be that ability to say, hey, that's blatantly unconstitutional. The General Assembly said you couldn't do it, and you did it. This amendment will destroy this bill. And if this amendment's in the bill, I'm not going to vote for this one. Thank you.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does Senator from Bath, Senator Deeds, rise?
Mr. President, speak to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, since about 2002 or 2003, I've been introducing redistricting constitutional amendments and bills. And this constitutional amendment is not the one that I would have introduced. It's not entirely consistent with everything that my ideas have put forth in the years past and even this year, but it's still a step forward. It's a step forward. I would prefer to have a commission that makes the final decision and keep the General Assembly out of it, because I think we have a built-in conflict of interest in drawing our own districts. And But I disagree with my friend from Southern Fairfax, because I don't think that political balance is something that we should strive for. I think what we should strive for is a fair district, fairly drawn districts that gives the people of the Commonwealth the opportunity to select their representatives of their choice. We don't have a constitutional right to these seats. We sit here because people elect us. This language that's offered by the senior senator from Richmond is similar to what's already part of the law in Iowa. And the constitutional districts there, the districts that work there, both congressional and legislative, are drawn using criteria similar to this. I think it works very well out there, and I'm going to vote for it. I'd urge you to as well.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Alexandria, Senator Ebbin, rise?
To speak in favor of the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
I might be a glutton for punishment, but I am one to be grateful for being on the P&E committee. And further, I'm grateful to the senior senator from Richmond for this amendment. The senator from Bath mentioned that this is similar to a component of the Iowa constitutional redistricting amendment. And I would say it's not just Iowa. It's all but one of the states that have a redistricting commission. Similar provisions are in Utah, Michigan, Missouri, Colorado, Arizona, California, Iowa, and Florida as well. The public expects us, if we're going to reform redistricting, to allow the voters to have more say, more of a voice in the elections, not less. And the current system in the mind of the voters of Virginia, or those that are paying close attention and concerned about why their districts shift around and why their districts don't seem to be competitive in cases where they could be competitive, is broken. And we have a chance to fix it. And the amendment provides, the underlying constitutional amendment resolution provides for a commission. But this amendment says the purpose of a commission. It's not just to draw districts, it's to draw districts without political considerations. So I hope that we'll do that and that we'll adopt the amendment. It is simple, and it speaks for a very simple principle, democracy. With that, I hope we pass the amendment.
Thank the senator. For what purpose is the senator from James City County, Senator Norman, rise?
To speak about the bill.
Senator has the floor.
First of all, I want to thank the senior senator from Richmond. I know that he has offered this amendment because he, in fact, is committed to it and believes in it. But also I want to thank him. It is a rare opportunity that I ever get a compliment on anything, and just feeling all the love emanating from the senior senator from Chesapeake is almost more than I can embrace on that. But I want to thank the senator from Southern Fairfax. For one occasion, we all know that the only thing that he does faster than running is speaking. And I want to thank him because he was speaking in a very deliberate manner that even I could understand this afternoon. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for picking up on my innuendo a moment ago that we're going to enjoy some bipartisanship. And I rise and associate myself with the comments from the senator from Southern Fairfax and encourage us to resist the amendment.
Thank the senator. For what purpose does the junior senator from Richmond City, Senator McClellan, rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the amendment.
Senator has the floor.
Very briefly, I just wanted to address the concern raised by the, I can't remember where he's from, gentleman from Southern Fairfax about the chilling effect that he believes this amendment would have on the commission. I didn't have the privilege of being on this side of the Capitol when we did redistricting, but I was on the other side of the Capitol and had the very strange experience of being a witness, not once but twice, in a lawsuit challenging redistricting maps. And when that process started, everybody lawyered up. When the bills weren't even introduced yet, the P&E committee and the people working with legislative services had a lawyer, the caucuses had lawyers, and everybody, when they had proposals for changes to the bills as introduced, they consulted with a lawyer. And I think whether we pass this amendment, whether we pass this resolution, more likely than not, just given where politics is today and given that redistricting brings out the worst in everybody, my guess is going forward, everybody's going to lawyer up anyway. And whoever is perceived to be on the losing end of redistricting is probably going to try to file a lawsuit. But when that lawsuit is filed, you have to prove that there was an intent to favor or disfavor any political party. Well, you know how you avoid such a finding? When you're drawing the maps, don't use political performance index data to draw it. And when you draw it, look at, are you keeping communities of interest together? Are you dividing the Commonwealth in a way that preserves one man, one vote? Are you complying with federal law under the Equal Protection Clause and the Voting Rights Act? And if you've done that, it's going to be very difficult, regardless of the impact. If the impact of the plan is it favors one party over another, that's not what the intent of drawing it was, because you didn't look at the data to begin with. And my guess is if no one on that commission is looking at the political data when drawing the map, it's going to be very difficult for even the best lawyer to prove their intent was to favor one political party over the other. And that's why I think if we're serious about saying we want to end gerrymandering, then just take the tools out of their hand that are used to do political gerrymandering. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose is Senator from Roanoke County? Senator Suderline rise.
Mr. President, speaking of the motion briefly.
Senator, the floor.
Mr. President, I would just like to suggest that if we want to take political data out of the map-making process, we have to make sure that the people drawing the map have never seen an election result in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm serious. Does anyone not remember when we were watching our last Senate returns and the Senate was hinging on one district left and the one county that hadn't reported was Powhatan? I knew things were looking pretty good from my perspective. And I suggest that other folks that wanted the Senate election to go a different way weren't happy that Powhatan was what was remaining. Now, is that because anyone had all the election data on Powhatan, or is it because we had observed an election happening in the Commonwealth before? And so I would just speak to that and leave that thought with you as we consider this amendment.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose does the Senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker, rise?
Mr. President, I don't do this too often, but I do rise to agree wholeheartedly with my colleague from Roanoke County, with one exception, and that was I didn't think we were looking too good when Powhatan was the only county out. So it was clear what the effect was going to be. And I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that there is absolutely no way possible, unless we sequester people without access to internet or TV or anything else, that the members of the commission. Because I guarantee you, whenever maps are proposed to the commission members, within 2 hours, the political calculations will have been made by everybody as to what those districts reflect. And it is simply something that is not possible other than pure sequestration in Antarctica or somewhere to be able to get a group of people who won't know anything about the political implications of things. And that's the fact of the matter, and it's reality that we have to recognize here, and we can't pretend that we're going to have these maps drawn and voted on when there are going to be multiple proposals of maps, presumably, and they won't know anything about the political implications of any of it. So I think that we need to recognize reality, to trust the members of the commission to be able to work together, because they have to collaborate. To pass any map, you have to get 6 of the 8 citizen members to vote for it, and you have to get 6 of the 8 legislators, which can include 4 people from one party and 2 from the other, or 3 from each. but you have to compromise and have to make sure that it's a plan that everybody, citizens and legislators, Republicans and Democrats, support to be able to move forward with. And I think it's time for us to trust the Commission to help to come up with a map, rather than pretend we can inoculate them from knowing anything about political data or what the voting patterns are in Virginia. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does the senior senator from Richmond, Senator Sturtevant, rise?
Mr. President, if no one else wishes to speak on the matter.
Do any other senators wish to be heard? Seeing none, Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, I want to echo the comments, especially of the other senator from Richmond City. I think she hit the nail on the head. And in our districts, which are next to each other, there are, as I'm sure many of you have similar situations, she will represent one side of a street and I'll represent another side of the street. And obviously, you have to draw the line somewhere, but what we've been doing in the past has not been working. Listening to the comments today, I would submit that we are, through this resolution, going to be creating an independent redistricting commission. That is the hope. But I would submit we are not putting in this resolution the most important part, and that is in this floor amendment. We do not want this redistricting commission drawing districts to favor or disfavor a political party, an incumbent legislator, a member of Congress, or an individual. None of us wants or should want that. And that this is the protection that we need in this resolution. And then I think secondly, as we all know, legal challenges have been ongoing since the last maps were drawn. And we've now had situations where a consultant from California has been redrawing those maps. And that's not the democratic process. That is not the way that this process should work. And so, again, I would renew my motion that the floor amendment be agreed to.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the floor amendment be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? No. The ayes have it. The floor amendment is agreed to. Seeing at least 8 hands, we'll have a recorded vote. Question is, shall the floor amendment be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will record their vote aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 17, noes 23.
Ayes 17, noes 23. The floor amendment fails. Senator from Southern Fairfax, Senator Barker.
Mr. President, I move that we now engross and advance this to its third reading.
Question is, shall the joint resolution be engrossed and advanced to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Resolution is engrossed and advanced to its third reading.